Good day, and welcome to the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Riggins. In each episode, I cover my experiences, both good and bad, of being a business builder, as well as my journey through the crazy world of entrepreneurship to reach my goal of earning $10 million a year. All right, and welcome to episode 155 of the podcast. Today is Friday, July the 5th, 2024. We are now officially in quarter three, having turned the corner, and now we get a chance to start working on the remainder of the year and even into 2025, which is probably a good idea. On today's agenda, we're looking at a quote from Jim Rohn. And then our topic for this quarter is going to be on leadership. It's going to be a lot of different types of information. Today, we're going to do an overview of the 6 families of leadership. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And today, we're going to actually start the first of 3 leadership styles. Today's style is going to be servant leadership. And the way these are designed for this quarter is each one of these topics, each one of these styles is going to be progressively more difficult to implement, but also for a more mature company. So the first one is for a typical startup company. The second one is for someone who's probably been in business for maybe 1 to 3 years. And then the third one that we'll be talking about is for companies that have grown large enough that they need to be able to deal with newer things that are falling into what we would call an agile style. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to go over some examples of servant leadership today. We're going to look at some areas to implement. And then we're going to talk about doing servant leadership on a personal level. Okay, so great topic. Really dig in today. I hope this is really helpful for you. I know that when I started studying this, it was a great thing for me to look at. And I was like, wow, I hadn't really thought about exactly how this all works. And I've incorporated part of it into my own style. We'll talk about that later on. Digging into our quote for the day, Jim Rohn, specific to this same topic, he said, "The challenge of leadership is to be strong, but not rude. Be kind, but not weak. Be bold, but not bully. Be thoughtful, but not lazy." That's something a lot of people have a problem with getting in place in their own life. He continued, "Be humble, but not timid. Be proud, but not arrogant. Have humor, but without folly." And folly in this case is being foolish or absurd. There's a lot of different definitions for it, but that's really for this particular part what we're really talking about. Looking into the business strategies, we're going to be doing a leadership overview. And so I want to break that into a slightly different style of conversation than we've been talking about. First, we're going to deal with leadership families, and that's really kind of important to understand that there are different styles within, if you would call it families or super styles of leadership. One of the most common ones is a directive leadership style. Now, this is very autocratic in style. It's centralized decision-making and strict control. This is what happens when somebody usually first gets into a leadership role and they have to kind of prove themselves. They have to do something different. Each of these directive leadership styles, including a bureaucratic leadership, which is kind of the opposite, we're still adhering to rules and procedures and a formal hierarchy, but they're guided by clear direction, making decisions independently, and expecting adherence to the instructions that the leader gives. Now that's something that a lot of people, when they first come into leadership, this is the style they go with, because quite frankly, there's a lot of people that are out there that this is their common style in a business, and seen from the outside, that's what it looks like. It really looks like you're doing something within that very strict structure. Another family is participative leadership styles. This is kind of the opposite. It's involving leaders who value input from their teams and they encourage participation in decision-making processes. Now, essentially, this is democratic leadership where there's group participation and shared decision-making. There's coaching leadership where we're developing individual skills and providing feedback along with fostering growth. In the third family is inspirational leadership styles. These are centered around leaders who inspire and motivate their teams through vision, personal charisma, and emotional influence. This is the leadership style that Russell Brunson recommends that you kind of use, is the transformational leadership where you're inspiring vision and motivational influence, intellectual stimulation. And with that comes charismatic leadership, which is a personal charm, persuasive communication, and emotional influence. And finally, the third part is visionary leadership, long-term vision and strategic foresight, inspiring direction. Now, visionary leadership tends to be for companies and people that are leaders that are a little bit more mature. They've taken on more of the process and they're handing it out to other people. Their goal is very much like servant leadership that we'll be talking about today. And it's designed to kind of take some of the pressure off of management. And in fact, servant leadership follows under our fourth style, which is supportive leadership styles. These are leaders who prioritize the well-being of their team members and support their personal and professional growth. And you'll hear that through this as we cover servant leadership. And along with servant leadership comes coaching leadership. This is where we're developing individual skills, providing feedback, and fostering growth. This is also a style that's very common with business coaches and executive coaches, is we're taking what skills the person has and we're making them more well-rounded. We're working with something like a concave mirror where the person gets a chance to see what they look like from outside of who they are. And that's the coaching leadership that we want to try to emulate at certain points. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to be dealing with the servant leadership today. Another style is a hands-off leadership style. And this is characterized by a high level of trust in the team members and minimal interference from leaders. This is usually how leaders work with other leaders. So top management works with middle management. It's almost a laissez-faire leadership. You're giving high autonomy and minimal influence, but you're also interfering less and providing trust within your employees. It's also a very common style when working with independent contractors. Independent contractors cannot take direction from somebody. They cannot set their hours. They can't, use shared tools. They can't do a lot of things. They are truly independent. They decide how they run their company, how they run the processes that they're doing. And that independent contractor style works very much in a laissez-faire style. And finally, we're going to be looking at transactional leadership styles. This is in that family where styles are based on clear structures, performance-based rewards, and management by exception. Now, this is very common in sales teams and sales groups. It's very transactional. You're dealing with performance-based rewards, clear structures, and management by exception, which means we're really giving everybody an exceptional experience of how they're doing it. We're not trying to break them down and create a problem. We're letting them rise to their level of competence, as opposed to a lot of companies that allow people to rise to their level of incompetence. And I've worked for a lot of companies that have that concept, you'll hear it called a lot of things bottom up and a variety of other very colorful names. This is kind of the leadership families that we run into, 6 families: directive, participative, inspirational, supportive, hands off, and transactional leadership styles. Now I want to dig into our main topic as we've covered the overview. This is servant leadership, empowering your team. Now, the first obvious question is, what is servant leadership? Well, servant leadership flips the traditional leadership model on its head. Instead of the team serving the leader serves the team. This approach prioritizes the growth, well-being, and development of team members, leading to a more engaged and motivated workforce. The key idea is that by empowering and supporting your team, you'll foster a productive and positive work environment. Now, service leadership is all about your team, so in service-based businesses, this can lead to significant improvements in both employee satisfaction and client or customer outcomes. By supporting and empowering your team, you'll create a more positive and productive work environment. Where is servant leadership used? Well, you'll most often find service leadership in various sectors, but it's particularly effective in service-based industries such as healthcare, hospitality, consulting, and education. We'll get more about that later on. These fields thrive on strong interpersonal relationships and a collaborative spirit, making them ideal for the servant leadership approach. Now, when does servant leadership work best? It really shines in environments that value collaboration. We kind of talked about that, but it's especially effective in teams that require high levels of trust and where individual contributions significantly impact overall success. In this case, we're talking about high contact service roles in industries like healthcare and hospitality, where the industry employees work closely with clients and customers, and the leader who supports and empowers their team can significantly enhance service quality. Also, in team-based projects where you're dealing with creative agencies and collaboration is key. In this case, servant leadership helps to nurture innovation and teamwork. And finally, nonprofit organizations where the mission often revolves around serving others. In this case, servant leadership can inspire and mobilize the team much more effectively. For a few examples of servant leadership in action, let's bring this concept to life with some examples that actually make sense. In the healthcare sector, imagine a hospital where the head nurse practices servant leadership. Instead of simply delegating tasks, this head nurse focuses on supporting their team. They provide additional training, they listen to concerns, and they ensure that the other nurses and nursing staff have the resources they need. It leads to a more engaged and capable nursing staff, improving the patient care and the overall job satisfaction. Now let's move over to the hospitality industry that we mentioned earlier. In a hotel, the general manager adopts this servant leadership style, so they spend time on the floor getting to know their staff and helping out where needed. This is often called a walk-around manager. I did that quite a bit when I was working in food service. By showing that the managers and the leaders are willing to get their hands dirty and prioritizing the employee needs, they build a strong, loyal team that delivers exceptional guest experiences. And to give you some idea, I'm going to lean back to the days of Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, where with fewer employees, I was able to get more sales through the door than other managers and leaders who were using a very autocratic style, very top-down, very rigid, very structured. And we were able to just get more done because even though I was working as a walk-around manager and not actually doing anything productive, it made sense to me to employ that because essentially I wasn't on the clock as far as efficiency and productivity was being measured. So by being a walk around manager, I was able to make sure that everyone else could be better managers for themselves. In a consulting firm, and I do a lot of this myself today, obviously, our primary goal in consulting is to support and develop the team members, right? The consultants that work with us, the administrative staff that keep things going. We're not just a boss. We really work as a mentor and their biggest advocate. We want our people to succeed. If your leadership style revolves around active listening, empathy, and a commitment to the growth of every individual on your team, you're going to get way ahead. So let's look at common places to implement servant leadership. Obviously, we want to have regular one-on-one meetings. We want to start those one-on-one meetings as not just a check about deadlines and project status. These sessions are designed to understand the team members on a deeper level. It's the goal to make things very effective along the way. Career goals. We want to ask open-ended questions about their career aspirations. I myself was one of those kind of employees who I always wanted to lead. I always wanted to go to the top of the class. I wanted to be ahead of everybody. And any kind of a job that kept me pushed down drove me absolutely insane. And it really kept me, in a case like that, from wanting to go to my full potential. And of course, I didn't stay very long at those kind of companies. Challenges and obstacles. Dealing with any hurdles that they're facing, both professionally and personally, can make the difference. If you ask questions like, what's been challenging for you lately and how can I support you better? It shows empathy and a willingness to help them overcome the obstacles that unfortunately you may be presenting or your clients may be presenting as the matter of doing daily business. And obviously a feedback loop. You want to encourage honest feedback about your leadership and the workplace environment. Okay? Are there any changes you'd like to see in how we operate? Is a great question. It fosters a culture of continuous improvement and mutual respect. I share a story that comes from my past where I began working for a food service place just as a regular line person, just like anybody else. But I went to the manager and asked, what do I need to do in order to move to the next level? And in that case, it was a shift leader. And the manager already knew I'd been an assistant manager previously for the same major corporation, so it wasn't a surprise. And so when I asked what I need to do, his question to me was very simple. How would you change things to improve them? And of course, I kind of hesitated like anybody would and said, I really don't think you really want to know. And he's like, no, I really do. And I was like, are you sure? And he said, yes. And so for 45 minutes, I laid out everything that I would do differently and how I would do it in that particular environment. And the manager thought about it for a second. He laid it out, asked a couple of questions, and he said, okay, the store is yours. And I implemented all the things that I talked about. Again, walk around manager, which was unique in the environment. And we were so much more productive than we had been that it really flew in the face of all the ways that the management was actually being measured and how the overall performance was being measured. It helped to redefine all the numbers of what it would take to be a top leader. Redefine the numbers nationwide, in fact. So let's talk about servant leadership on a personal level. Obviously, you want to deal with people one-on-one, but this also works within yourself as a servant leader. You want to make sure that whether you or your people are being, the ones you're talking about, you want to make sure you have short-term goals that can be achieved in the next 3 to 6 months. They should meet the SMART goal category: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. There should also be long-term goals. What are their aspirations for the next few years? How can their current role help them to get there, and what will they need to do to improve in their current role in order to make that transition smoother? And you, if you're in servant leadership, get a chance to work now as a mentor for that. And finally, what actions will they take to reach these goals? Again, this could be something they need to take on new in the responsibilities. They need to attend training sessions, or they need to work on specific projects. Whatever the case is, all three of these are a personal level aspect of servant leadership. These are the parts of servant leadership that make everything better. And having it at a personal level, not only for the people that work for you, but you yourself, because you probably, even if you are the owner, you're answering to your clients, you're answering to your customers. It's one of those things that a lot of people misunderstand about being in business, is they go into business thinking they're going to be their own boss, only to find out that a certain portion of their oversight and everything else comes from their customers and their clients and the people that they work for. And it's a surprise for a lot of people. So you want to make sure on a personal level that you always maintain short-term goals, long-term goals, and action steps, both for yourself and the people that work for you. So with that information, we're going to go ahead and close out episode 155 of the podcast. We did our quote from Jim Rohn. We talked about leadership as an overview for the 6 families of styles. And then we covered heavily into servant leadership, all the different parts of it, gave some examples of it, and then focused on personal level interactions of how it works for you. I want to thank you and wish you the best in your health, your wealth, your business, your family, everything about you. Take care. Have a great week. We'll come back next week with a brand new topic.